Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am so sorry about that delay. We've got Stephanie in the meeting now, and we are good to go. Welcome to the June Summer Series Lunch and Learn. We have Stephanie Burkhart with Heightened Potential back with us today. She's going to continue fine and visual motor development, but this is a part two. We're going to focus on ages 3 to 6. So, Stephanie, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. One more thing, any questions that anyone may have during the presentation, please put those in the chat and we will address those at the end. I'll read those out. All previously recorded Lunch and Learns can be found on the TEIS Community Resource website, and I will put that link in the chat as well so everyone can access those if needed. And I think that's it. I think we're ready to get started. Thank you, Stephanie.
Perfect. So yeah, I'm really excited to present today on that part two. So building off what we did last month, and this is going to focus on ages 3 to 6. Originally, we had kind of said 3 to 5, but since a lot of our kids with the extended option are pushing closer to 6 sometimes when they actually end early intervention services and transition to school, we've kind of expanded that to the 3 to 6 to go over today. So just a brief overview, we're gonna re-go over what fine and visual motor skills are, and then we'll go through those developmental milestones for ages 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and then 5 to 6, and any other considerations that we need to be aware of when we're talking about school readiness for our kids transitioning out of the early intervention services. So just really quick recap, fine motor skills are those is the coordination of small muscles in the hands, fingers, and wrists to perform precise controlled movements. So we're looking at object manipulation, muscle strength, sensation, dexterity, awareness, and motor planning. So all the things that you have to be able to do to carry out something like picking up a spoon, holding a pen to write your name, things like that. And then the visual motor piece is the actual ability to see some sort of visual input, interpret it, and then respond with that coordinated muscle movement. So often they're linked together, which is what we're going to do today when we go through all this. So it's just easy to kind of combine them and say fine and visual motor skills together as we talk about things. So we're going to jump right in. So kids ages 3 to 4, we're looking for them to start imitating and copying things like 4-block structures. So if you think about like building a little train or a small castle, imitating would be building it and they're watching you build it and then they do the same thing, versus copying, in which like you might be silly and say like, oh, I'm going to hide it, look, and you build it behind, a folder or your hand, and then they have to look at it and copy it and make it. So imitating is they're getting to watch you make it, where copying, they have to do it from a visual model without any of that prompting and watching you do it. We're also looking for kids in this age to start completing inset puzzles with and without matching picture backgrounds. So I feel like everybody's probably seen, I think they're Melissa and Doug, those, it's like a cat and a dog and a bird, and they've got the picture behind them. So we see kids start using those, and they're matching the pictures. And then we're also learning orientation of a piece by matching to the picture. So not only do I know the dog and the dog match, but I know like, oh, the doggy's ears go at the top because the picture, in their little inset, the ears are at the top. So we learn to turn the puzzle piece to fit it in. And then we advance on from being able to just look at the picture and match it to then looking at the outline of an inset. So then you have puzzles that don't have pictures on the background. You have to only put it in based on the shape of whatever, dinosaur it is. We're also looking at kids to start building on bilateral coordination skills. So they're starting to string beads, and they may have started on a little rod or a pipe cleaner, and then they're getting more stable and the dexterity is getting better and they can do it on a loose shoestring. And then we're also seeing them going from just snipping paper or cutting across paper to actually cutting on a line with accuracy. We also see in this age that they're going to start to, I always say, attempt to stay within the lines. They may be able to point out where the line is, and you may prompt them like, oh, let's stay inside the lines, and maybe 20, 30, 40% of it is within the lines, but at least they're acknowledging that they know where the lines are and they're attempting to stay within the lines when they color. Grasp at this age is starting to transition into a more mature grasp. So something like you and I would use. You're looking at 3 to 4 finger grasp with that tripod or quadrupod grasp on the marker, pen, crayon, whatever it is. Most people, I feel like, use a 3-finger grasp, but according to the American Occupational Therapy Association, a 4-finger grasp is also considered functional. So if you have a child who's using 4 fingers, it is okay. They don't have to only use 3. Any more than 4, we would consider atypical and we would work on, but 3 or 4-finger grasp at this age is totally fine. We also see them building their drawing skills, and they're going to start imitating and copying a cross shape. So that vertical and horizontal lines starting to intersect, making that cross shape or a T shape. We see at this age they'll start to make, and then they're going to start drawing a person with 2 or more features. This is, in my opinion, the funniest age for kids to start drawing pictures of themselves, because we call it like the potato head or the tadpole style person. You're going to see them make a circle, and they might have 2 dots for an eyes and a weird squiggly for a mouth. And if they've moved past that and they're understanding like arms and legs, it's going to come right out of the head. So the arms are off to the side, the legs are coming off the bottom of the head. So we call it like a potato head style person. And again, in that age range, it's totally fine for them not to have a body right away. And then at this age, it's parents' favorite age during meal times, because kids are spilling less and less using their forks and spoons. So just some things that you may see in an OT session if you have a patient who's working on those 3 to 4-year-old skills. So you may have them following 2 to 4 step directions to make a bracelet. So they may have to cut the string, you may help them tie it, and then you give them the direction to pick out 6 beads, put them on the string, and then, we'll tie it off together. So with prompting and with assistance, they're carrying out a multi-step craft. At this age, you're also going to see them take those lines and circles, plus the new cross figure that we're learning, to create that person. So they're going to move from, like I said, that tadpole or potato head style person, and they'll progress towards making a stick figure. I really like to harp on this skill for just a second, because it's one of the most important, in my opinion, because this is like the very foundation for literacy skills in our kids. Before they can write, before they can like write out a story or a sentence or anything, they're building a story in the pictures that they make. So it's really important that we not only teach them how to like draw pictures and show them like, oh, look, you made this circle. Could we make it a flower? How would we do that? What color do you think your flower is? And expand on that motor skill. Because also when we look at circles and lines and crosses, all of our letters are based in those very, very basic skills, or those very basic shapes, excuse me. So not only are we building up their literacy skills to tell a story in a picture, we are building the very foundational skills they need to make letters later on. So that's my little soapbox I'll get on for that. But I do like to just draw attention to that, because so many times we want to skip that phase. We want kids to just skip right to handwriting, but it's so, so important that we talk about shapes and combining them to make pictures. The next thing we could often see them do is doing like a 2 to 4 step craft outside of just like oops. Oh no. Can anyone still see my screen?
Yes, we can still see
okay. It tried to kick me out of the meeting for a second there. Okay, there we go. So jumping back into the craft portion. So outside of something like making bracelets, you're going to see them starting to cut, color, and glue from a 2D or 3D model. That's one of my favorite things to do. You cut out you help them cut out a circle, or you cut on a line to make 2 squares, and we're going to combine it to make a truck somehow. Or they do it from a 2D or 3D model. This is also one of the best ages to start participating in some of those more messy sensory bins, because a lot of our friends at least have a little bit more motor control and it's less of a mess, to start using tongs and spoons, scoops, bowls, things like that. So that's kind of our 3 to 4-year-old range. Now, it doesn't mean that every single 4-year-old or every single 3-year-old is going to hit every single one of those, because it is a whole year that we're kind of covering with these skills. You're going to see maybe they do 3 or 4 of those skills right at 3, and then it takes a little longer on a couple of the other ones. That's okay. We just like to see the progression throughout the year towards hitting those. So for ages 4 to 5, we have that hand dominance starting to be established. I have this also on the 5 to 6-year-old slide, because we say ages 4 to 6, that's when we start to see that hand dominance really, really be established. So whether they're right-handed or left-handed, this is also the time that you're going to hear a lot of parents maybe say, I think my child's ambidextrous. There are plenty of ambidextrous people out there. A lot of times I like to tell parents, like, are they ambidextrous, or do we not cross midline? So that idea that our brain, because we have 2 hemispheres in our brain, creates an imaginary midline aligned down the middle of your body. And if we don't have the best coordination or body awareness, sometimes our brain will tell us like, hey, left hand can't cross into the right side of our body, and vice versa. So we'll see kids who only draw on the left side of their paper with their left hand, and they only draw on the right side of their paper with the right hand. So you'll see them literally switch as they're coloring and drawing. That child's most likely not ambidextrous. They might end up teaching themselves to be ambidextrous because their brain hasn't told them that they can cross over into the other sides of their body. But at this age, because we want a hand dominance to be established, we're going to really, really look at which hand is a little more coordinated, which one's maybe a little bit stronger, and kind of start pushing a dominance. Like, oh, hey, let's not switch today. Let's only use righty or only use lefty while we're doing, our coloring today. So you may see the therapist start to push that a little bit more in this age range. They're also going to start imitating and copying squares, triangles, and diagonal lines. So again, we're building on those very, very basic shapes into more complex shapes, which also means then later on our stories and our pictures can get a little bit more complex. They're also going to be cutting out simple shapes with more accuracy. So you may see them start doing that towards the end of age 3, kind of pushing towards 4, and then 4 to 5 is where they really build on that accuracy. They start to understand how to stay on a line, how to turn the paper versus turning our scissors to stay on the line when we're cutting out things like squares and triangles. They're also going to be doing simple interlocking puzzles. So this is when we think those really basic, again, Melissa and Doug, those little 12 and 16 piece interlocking puzzles that maybe have the really cute little picture outlines and boards. We'll see them start doing those, and then they'll progress into more of the jigsaw puzzles that don't have the board to give that visual cue of, oh, hey, the orange dino is going in the right corner, and the red dino, I see his tail over here, it's going in the left corner. So we're going to see them start to move out of those inset puzzles and do more of the interlocking where they have to match pictures and understand orientation of the pieces based on a picture they can only see a portion of. They can't see the whole thing. At this age, we're also starting to use fasteners on clothing and toys. So we're thinking of buttons, snaps, zippers. We're not like tying or anything like that yet, but definitely those simple buttons or big buttons and simple snaps at this age. Our kids are starting to be really independent in that. They're also starting to pour into a cup or bowl with increased accuracy. So you're going to see less and less spillage with sensory bins when they're doing water play, things like that. Our grasp at this stage, we don't see a whole lot of change typically in terms of the actual fingers that are involved. So if they're already at the 3-finger or 4-finger, we usually see it stay there. But instead, we're going from seeing them maybe move just their wrist and their whole arm to draw or write something, and they're going to look a little bit more like you and I. We're having a dynamic movement of the digits rather than seeing that wrist and shoulder movement, which allows them to then draw and write in smaller spaces because they're able to use smaller muscles versus big gross motor groups to have that movement. So if you are in a session and we're working on 4 to 5-year-old skills, you're going to see, like I said earlier, we're going to combine more of those complex shapes to make those simple creations. So we're going to use rectangles and circles to make a car. We're going to use a circle with a cross and diagonal lines with multiple facial features to have a more complex stick person. So as our shapes become more complex, our creations are a little more complex, and then our stories become more complex because a kid can tell you more about what's going on in their picture because it now has more features. They're also going to be completing those 2 to 4 step crafts, but maybe with decreased help. You may not have to give them cues for every single step. You might be able to tell them at the beginning, hey, this is what we're going to do. Here's what you need to do. And they'd be able to carry it out with maybe 1 or 2 cues versus a cue on every single step. This is also a really fun age to start doing some of those simple cooking and baking tasks with help. I love doing just like those, I think they're Betty Crocker, like the little bag cookies, because there's only 3 or 4 steps. They get to use both hands together to break the egg. So they're understanding force modulation. How much pressure does it really take to crack an egg and not have the shells all in the batter? They get to use scissors to cut across the bag to open it. They have to pour with accuracy into a bowl. They have to hold something and stir. And sometimes those mixtures can be a little resistant. So they have to really use some muscle to get all of it mixed together. And then they have to figure out how much is too much when we're doing a simple scoop and carry over into, a little cupcake tin. So that is a really, really fun activity to kind of combine all these fine motor movements that you may see during an OT session for a child that age. So then that 5 to 6-year-old range, which some of us will get to work on with our kids depending on their birthday, some of us won't, just depending on where their birthday lies and when they transition into school. But This again is where we see that hand dominance established. If we're still crossing, or if we're still using both hands, we start to really, really look at it at this age in terms of, okay, are we crossing midline? Are we not crossing midline? Do we have some strength deficits to where our poor little hand really can't withstand coloring for more than 5 minutes? We have to switch hands. So we really start to dig into it at this age if our little friends are having a hard time maintaining a hand dominance. We'll also see them build more complex structures with blocks and Legos. We're doing 24 or more piece interlocking puzzles. Most of the time for these, they don't have those cute little boards or outlines to give those visual cues for where pieces go. They're drawing more those simple pictures again that are telling stories, but again, that has more and more detail. They're coloring within boundaries and lines with accuracy, and then they're writing their first name from memory on a single line typically. So just think like old school worksheets. It says name, one single line, they're writing it right on there. And then they are copying letters and numbers, cutting out more novel and complex shapes. I put on here begins to tie laces. We are in the age of Crocs. And for whatever reason, I feel like because our kids wear Crocs more and more, the opportunity to practice tying shoes is just less and less. So typically we'll start around 5 or 6 teaching a kid to tie their shoes, and then trying to push and make families understand if we want them to have this skill, they just need to practice a little more, and we might have to hide the Crocs for a little while. So kind of beginning at 5, that way we can push towards age of 6 or 7 being fully independent in that skill. And then also at this age, we want them to start cutting with a knife safely. So very, very simple things with not a whole lot of resistance, and understanding how to hold something safely, and then how to also transport a knife maybe to and from the table safely, the same way you would with scissors, pointing it down, walking slowly, that sort of thing. So if you're in an OT session and the child is working on those 5 to 6-year-old skills, you may see the therapist having them build Legos from just a picture card with decreased assistance, drawing multiple simple pictures to tell a story. So again, we have the picture of the car, but this time you can tell it's a truck, and you can tell that the front door is open and that it has its headlights on or something. So again, there's just more detail to it, so they can tell a little bit more of a complex story. This is also when handwriting practice starts. So there's so many different protocols. There's so many different programs that therapists all have their favorite. So you may see some really, really formal instruction with this in terms of like, oh, I have this workbook and we work through it and this is how we do it. You may see some more informal address, or people informally addressing this with more of, hey, we're going to build it with these cars, and then we're going to make it in the shaving cream, and then I'm going to have you go to the window and use a dry erase marker, and I want you to try writing it 2 times. So it really does vary, but at this age we are doing that handwriting practice, which is it can get a little difficult, because most of the time for these kids at this age, we want them writing their name, writing letters. But up until this point, our hands haven't really been ready in terms of grasp and strength to do a lot of this practice. So like I said, you may see more of that informal addressing of it without pen and paper, so that they're learning the motor plan. They're learning how to make it. They get that muscle memory. Oh, a K is a big line down. You jump, slide in, slide out, without having the pressure of that coordination and that strength that the child might not have yet. So you might, like I said, see it in shaving cream, in rice and beans, building it with 3D things before you really see it put on paper. You're also going to be seeing a child do maybe 3 or more step crafts with just a 2D model, and they're doing it very accurately. Making simple meals while using a knife. So one of my favorites is making a sandwich. So they have to, tell me everything they would need for the sandwich, get all the supplies out, do it safely with a knife, show me how they would cut it, spread, all that, how we would safely put it in the dishwasher, in the sink, and then carry a plate to the table. And then, as I said earlier, with the shoe tying, we're going to do lots of prep, everything you would need to tie your shoes. So working on knot tying, lacing, bilateral coordination to understand how, we have to use both hands together, even though one is doing an action, one is maybe holding something still, and kind of working through every single little skill that you need before you full on practice shoe tying. So this is just something that I had a parent give me, actually, and she was one of my patients. She did extended option until she was a little over 4, and then transitioned to the schools for preschool. And this was given to her before, when they were trying to decide if she needed another year of preschool, they were ready for kindergarten. So I did put a little disclaimer. This does not apply to all preschools and classroom or kindergarten classrooms. It's just a specific example that was helpful for me as a therapist to understand, because I know developmentally where a child needs to be fine motor wise and visual motor wise to go to school. But this gave me other things to consider when I'm trying to prepare a parent or prepare a child for transitioning into the classroom. So this was what was given to her. And she said, think about this. What can, that child do out of all of these? What do they still need help on? And are they going to be best served in the classroom if there's too many of things that they can't do fully independently yet? So other things that we should consider when we're looking at our kids and their school readiness is their self-help skills. Can they independently go to the bathroom, get dressed, and feed themselves? Can they adhere to a routine in terms of what I know to walk in, unpack my bag, put my lunchbox here, my papers go here, and every morning I go, to this center? Are they able to play and work independently? Are they able to complete tabletop tasks without constant prompting, or are they able to go and play in a center for a prolonged period of time without prompting, to stay in their own space? Transition skills, are they able to walk to and from the classroom, the lunchroom, playground, gym, specials, anything like that without physical assistance? And not even just physical assistance in the way of like we have a wheelchair or a walker, but more of like, are we able to transition in that way without having to hold a hand because we'll wander off, sort of thing. Also thinking about their sensory processing and body awareness skills. Are they able to stay in their own area and their own space? Are they able to regulate enough to sit in a chair, or are we constantly falling, off the side or falling into our classmate or leaning on the desk and pushing it into our other friends? And then seated and dual attention. Are they able to sit and attend with a whole group for extended periods of time without that one-on-one assistance to stay focused? So those are just other things to consider outside just those fine and visual motor skills for when our kids are getting ready to transition into the classroom. And that's my spiel. I'm gonna exit out of here and stop sharing my screen real quick.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you, Stephanie. Great information. We don't have any questions in the chat right now, but we're going to hang out. I'm sure that there will be some questions that pop up. I did want to mention, I'm going to put your email address in the chat too, Stephanie, just in case anybody has any questions. I know last time you mentioned a couple of handouts that people could reach out to you to obtain if they were interested. Okay, we've got a couple of hands raised. Give me just a second. Christy, I will get to your question in just a moment, but I did see some hands raised. So let me get to those. Let's see where they went. Those of you that had your hands raised, I'm not seeing them still raised, so they may have unraised them. If you were one of the ones that just had your hands raised, would you put something in the chat for me? If you do have a question, I'm not seeing a raised hand, so it might be better to put the question in the chat and we could read it out. Or if it's more lengthy, I can unmute you, but I'm not seeing the raised hand. So we'll hang on. We'll go back to those. We'll do Christy's question. And then if those others had questions, we'll get to those as well. Christy said, what are some exercises to build hand strength to improve upon utensil hold between the thumb and fingers versus gripping in the fist?
Yeah, so really good question. A lot of times if we're full on fist gripping, it's because we need all of those muscles to do that activity or that's carry out that skill. So what I always say is if you were to give the child something a little bit smaller to hold on to, do they open up what we call a web space, so that little space in your hand? If they don't, then we're going to want to do some strengthening for that specifically on top of just our digits. So one of my favorite things is just Play-Doh, 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 squeezing, rolling, cutting, pinching. Any sort of action with Play-Doh has enough little bit of resistance to build those little muscles in the hand. If you feel like, oh, they're a little bit bigger, Play-Doh's not resistive enough, then putty is a great thing. You can just get off Amazon, or there's probably even recipes to make it. And you can use that putty that has that resistance. You can dig beads out of it. You can hide treasure in there where they have to really pull everything apart to strengthen those muscles. any sort of weight bearing on the hands, having them crawl, having them, walk up a slide on hands and knees, having them in quadruped and doing exercises. If they like to watch a movie or TV, have them in quadruped doing it. That way, those muscles in your hand are getting that constant weight on them, and it will strengthen them that way. The other thing, and parents love this, have them wash the table, have them wash the window, have them help you wash their car, and get them a sponge or a washcloth, and they have to wring it out or make it a contact. So you give them a small little bucket and then a big bucket, and they have to see how many times it takes to fill up their sponge and then run it over and then squeeze it into the other bucket. That's a really, really nice resistance piece to help build the strength in those hands. The other one I really like to do is any little game that uses pincer grasp to help maintain that wide open space, like spill the beans, using tongs in a sensory bin, or using scissors forces that hand open and is going to give enough resistance that you'll strengthen it that way. So not strictly
Awesome.
exercises. I have like very formal exercises, but kids get too bored with them. There's no point in fighting them. So you might as well make it a play-based one.
Awesome. I love that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the quadruped position would be?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Quadruped position is just hands and knees. So it's that
Okay.
crawling position. And if a child can't maintain that, for whatever reason, they can always be in like a low kneel, and you can have them place their hands down and they can kind of like rock on them. It would be the same sort of thing.
Perfect. Thank you. So Jennifer says, where can we access the slides from both Lunch and Learns by Stephanie? This is great milestone info for everyone who is part of the IFSP team. Jennifer, all of the previously recorded Lunch and Learns can be found on the TEIS community resource website. I did place a link to the community resource website a little bit higher up in the chat. If you navigate to that link, in the center of the page, you'll see an area that says, I think it says Early Intervention Lunch and Learns. You'll click on that. The previous presentation that Stephanie did is now available on that list. So the whole PowerPoint is there, or the presentation is there. And as I mentioned before, if you were interested in obtaining those slides themselves, Stephanie, could she email
Yeah,
you to receive those? Okay,
absolutely.
perfect. And I will place Stephanie's email in the chat here in just a moment. Let's see, we have another question. M. Fleming says, what are some practices to support children with hand over, I think this is maybe with overhand lapping, such as the motion for wheels on the bus? I'm thinking maybe like rolling hands. What are some practices to support children with overhand lapping, such as the motion for wheels on the bus?
So I would say I'm thinking she's meaning like bilateral coordination, some symmetrical movement. My number one thing when I'm working on symmetrical movement is finding some sort of song that entices them, like Wheels on the Bus. If you're happy and you know, clap your hands, things like that, to practice those. I would love a little bit information, like more information if she wants to pop that in there. I'm wondering if it's a motor issue. If she's saying if there's a strength issue, if it's coordination, we can't do this. I'm curious on a little more detail so that I can answer that correctly.
Yeah, Ms. Fleming, if you want to place any more follow-up questions in the chat. Let's see. We got another question, but feel free to drop any more detail in there so Stephanie can give you as much good detail as possible. Oh, she did say coordination issue.
Okay. So typically, if we're having a hard time coordinating both sides of our body, I would like to do a lot of body awareness prep first. So any sensory activity with vestibular and proprioceptive info for their body. So swinging, picking them up in your arms and like flipping them upside down. Fireman carry over, your shoulder to get their brain warmed up, and then lots of squeezes, or big hugs, or put them in a beanbag and squish them, just so they understand where their body is. And then I love doing things again in quadruped, that hands and knees position, and have them reach with right hand into the left side of their body for whatever toy they want to play with. So I love like the little piggy toy that has the coins, having them reach across midline to do that. And then opposite, left into the right side of the body. A lot of times if we can't coordinate symmetrical movement, it's because we don't understand what right hand is doing. I don't know what left hand is doing, and I can't coordinate them together if I can't even figure out which one is doing what by itself. So let's take a little bit of the challenge away, work on righties coordination, just reaching. Let's work on lefties coordination with just reaching. And then let's bring them together and try doing a reciprocal movement. So definitely, if you have a specific kid in mind, Ms. Fleming, talk to your OT about what they're seeing in terms of other coordination issues, because if you could work on some midline crossing, I love doing, like, we call them little doodle bug exercises where they lay on their back and they pretend to be a doodle bug and opposite arm and leg go up together and come down together. Again, so it's a lot of just opposite body coordination. Um, to kind of help with that. Another really fun one would be like ball play with a kid. If they can use hands together to roll a ball and then roll it back to them and have them catch with two hands. So again, we're working on just some, not only just righty by itself, not just lefty by itself, but together to have a simple action like catching something when it's rolled to us. That would be very helpful too. And then you can move it into more of an action like rolling here. And if the child does tolerate hand over hand, I don't think there's anything wrong as long as they're not super upset by it, by putting, your hands on there and be like, oh, let's do it together. Let's do, the wheels on the bus. Let's do patty cake, things that are symmetrical. So they start to understand how hands can work together to do something.
Awesome. We have another question. Says, for our kiddos who are blind or have low vision, how can we help build fine motor development?
Oh, that's a good question. So I like to add texture with a lot of my toys and things when I'm working on fine motor stuff for my kids with low vision or blindness. So that could be anything, any sort of texture that they'll engage with. If I'm wanting them to grasp and do something specific, I have little bump dots that I can remove and I place on different toys. So when I, give it to them and I say like, oh, let's reach in, let's find the bump on our red, our red puzzle piece. When we find our bump, let's grab it. Just so they're starting to understand that association of, I feel something, this is what I'm looking for. For our older kids, like we covered in the ages 3 to 6, when we look at low vision, we want to think of high contrast. So having high contrast paper, so pure black on really bright white paper line wise is super helpful when they're starting to write, and making sure that we're not asking them to write with like a light yellow pen, like they can't see that. So let's make it a little bit darker. Let's have that high contrast so they can see what they're actually writing. I have a lot of kids on my caseload right now with CVI, which is another like visual impairment. So understanding that some kids with visual impairments, black and white might not do it for them. CVI especially, they respond well to like blue, red, and yellow. So making sure that maybe we have, this yellow or red thing on a really solid background so they see that contrast when I'm asking them to look and reach for a toy, or having, that solid background and giving them that color when they're drawing. So that they understand, then they get that visual feedback of, oh, I did make a line. Oh, I did make a cross. So that it's meeting them where they're at with their visual skills, and we're making some accommodations there, so that they can still see it. For kids with more of a visual perceptual issue, maybe versus an actual visual deficit, in terms of like they're just not perceiving parts of, the bottom half of the line versus the top half of the line. I tell parents, oh, our uppercase letters look great, but those lowercase letters, oh my, the short ones are huge. They don't understand where the middle and bottom are. Let's just highlight that with yellow. And then we can tell them, hey, all of our short lowercase letters, just put them in the yellow, let them sit right there. That's another really good way to start to teach them, hey, this is what the bottom half of the line means. Keep, A, E, C, M, N, all those small letters, keep them in yellow. That's where their house is. That's where their home is. And then that allows them to not have to stress about the visual piece. They can focus on the motor piece of just drawing that S inside the yellow. Hopefully that answered your question, Dawn.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. We have another question. What are some home activities that you would suggest for kids with, and I don't know if I'm going to get this word right. Can you see the chat, Stephanie?
Yes, I can open it up. Oh, I'm not going to try to pronounce that either because I won't do it right. Those are like webbed, like smaller webbed fingers, I believe, if I'm not crazy, or like fused.
Okay.
That is a great question. Middle finger specifically pre or post surgery. Wow, now I'm like really digging my brain. This is great. I would honestly go to more of the adaptive and compensation piece if we're doing pre-surgery things. Post-surgery, I'm not going to speak too much of. I don't know enough about those surgical protocols to know what they recommend immediately after. So if you do have a specific kid, definitely reach out to that therapist and make sure you're following whatever range of motion and ortho protocol that they have, because I've never touched that, and I don't want to make the wrong recommendation there. Pre-surgery, I could recommend that you would definitely look at more adaptation things. So if they only have minimal movement in those digits in the hand, Getting built up like handles on things would be helpful, so that they can grasp things a little bit easier. Um, I'm trying to think of other things like right off the top of my head. Yeah, I guess my biggest thing is typically there's only going to be partial movement at that hand and those fingers. So giving them built up things so they're a little bit wider, easier to hold. We won't expect dynamic movement at that point because we don't, if it's fused, we can't use our digits like that. So we're going to just have to kind of deal with more of the wrist and forearm movement, allowing for strengthening with other gross motor movement because we're going to have to compensate would be helpful. And then again, knowing that if our depending on the age and what we're expecting them to do. If we are thinking more that 3 to 6 range and we haven't had surgical intervention yet, asking them to write on small lines might not be realistic because we can only make our wrists move so small. We might need to give them a bigger space to carry out whatever fine motor activity or, drawing activity they want to do, so that they have enough space if they're moving their whole wrist or arm, whatever. It's not, it's not coming off the page or it's not going outside the lines the way that, they've been instructed to. Hopefully that was
Perfect.
helpful.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm going to read that question again, just for our transcript. I don't want to leave that word out for
yes.
anybody that, you're good. For anybody that may be listening, I'm going to try to pronounce this. I think it's syndactyly, middle fingers. And the question was about how to home activities that you would suggest for kiddos with syndactyly, middle fingers, pre-post surgery. So just reading that out for our transcript in case anybody is reading. But we do have several more questions. Nicole Marin says, how do I help a 17-month-old with Down syndrome with eye-hand coordination? We are utilizing stacking rings and placing a ball in a chute, but has difficulty placing them in the correct spot. She said, just be patient, or are there other exercises that can help?
There's probably other things that we could do. I would wonder just a little bit about vision because our friends with Down syndrome typically do have some visual deficits. So I would start asking about that. Like, do we have anything that we haven't addressed yet? Do we have glasses, things like that? If not, let's make sure we get into an optometrist or ophthalmologist, depending on what they need, to make sure our vision is there. Because it sounds like if you're utilizing stacking ring, oh, look at that, where's glasses? Okay, thank you. That takes away part of it. So if you're utilizing stacking rings, that's really great. That means that they're understanding here's a ring, this is the hole, there's only one spot to put it. And so I put it on there. Placing a ball in a chute, if they have difficulty getting it in the correct spot, I would wonder if we have any depth perception issues and like body awareness in terms of like, I don't know where my body is and the toy is. So making sure that we're upright, we're supported. I don't know if the 17-month-old is walking, sitting independently or anything like that, but that'd be something to consider is how far are you asking them to reach before they have to put something in? Are they stable sitting there? And then I'd also wonder again, if we have glasses, if there's any other visual things going on. If we need like a solid background behind the toy so that we're not visually getting distracted to know where the chute is that we're putting the ball in. Considering also if we have some other visual things going on, are they looking down to put the ball in the chute? Are they looking up trying to reach to put the ball in the chute? Or is it right at eye level where they can understand and see the top and see where they're putting it in? If we're having a hard time with getting the ball in the chute as well, start with something bigger. Start with a ball in a big basket and let's see how they do. Are we always reaching to the right side? Are we always reaching to the left side? Are we finally like making it in the basket well if it's in front of us, and then starting to move it in like maybe an arc so that they have to follow and put it in, and then slowly make whatever you're asking them to put that ball in a little bit smaller so we understand the actual container we're putting it in, and then we're understanding how precise we have to be to actually make it land. That's where I would go with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have another question. Actually, this is more like a helpful comment. I like this. She says this is back to letter writing. Whenever I'm helping kiddos with writing, I label the lines as the sky, the fence, and the grass. There's specific paper that has these visuals on there too. Thank you, Sarah. That's interesting.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't heard that one, so I like that one. I've heard the headline, waistline, foot line, and they'll have a little person drawn next to it, but I've never heard that. I like that. That's cute.
That's awesome. Let's see. Nicole said, thank you so much for the information about that question. We have another question, recommendations for trigger finger.
Oh, okay. So I don't have a lot of experience with trigger finger in pediatrics. I've done it in geriatrics before, which was a lot of just gentle stretching. If we're doing a repetitive movement that's causing that, trying to put a little bit, either some compensation in there so we're not constantly putting that finger in that position. And then there's also splinting that you can, honestly, I think back back in the day when I did geriatrics, there were even splints you could buy online for those to help with just the positioning to keep that muscle and everything kind of stretched out. If it's something that you're concerned about that might need splinting or might need something like that, you can always also refer to PCP or to ortho to see if it's something that's severe enough that would need a surgical intervention. But typically, it's gentle stretching, splinting to keep that muscle and tendon and everything elongated and in the correct position, and then trying to compensate to avoid any repetitive movement that's going to irritate and put us back in that position.
Thank you so much. I did go ahead and place Stephanie's email address in the chat. It's sburkhart.ot@gmail.com. So wanted to read that out as well. We have another question from Christy. What types of things can be worked on to prepare children who struggle with body awareness, and in parentheses, staying in their own space, to be in a classroom setting?
Yeah, so body awareness has a lot to do with the proprioceptive system and understanding where your body is in space. Proprioceptive system, I could get on a rant, but I won't, is basically just the input your brain gets on where your body is from its muscles and joints. So a lot of times our kids who don't have great body awareness, they're like kind of flaily. They're like laying on the wall, or the ones that are always like laying half on the wall as they walk down the hallway at school, or they're constantly bumping into things or other people. So what I always say is be really proprioceptive heavy with your activities that you do with them. So lots of weight bearing, lots of like squeezes to their whole body. I love putting kids like in a fitted sheet and rolling them really tight and then unrolling them. That gives whole body some great sensory input. If they like swimming, and since it's summertime, if you have the opportunity to recommend swimming, that's full body proprioceptive input, gives great awareness to where your body is in space. So I always say proprioceptive heavy in your activities so they understand where their body is, because they can't respect other space if they don't even understand what their body is doing. A really fun game to kind of also prep them is Simon Says. That way they have to coordinate their body. Simon says, put your hands on your head. Simon says, put your hands on your legs. That way they're also connecting, where is my body? And am I getting the feedback that I'm touching the correct body part? Like, oh, I can feel my hands on my knees. Yes, I touched the correct body part. The next thing I love to do is the hula hoop game. If you have a hula hoop, if you don't, you can always just make something, even just like tie a big towel together or a sheet together, and they have to carry it around. And you tell them that is your space. If you are hitting somebody with your hula hoop, your sheet, whatever it is, you are too close to them. That means you're in their space. So that gives them a nice visual, because a lot of times when we say space, kids are like, I don't know what that means. Am I too close? Am I not close enough? So that gives them something really hard and concrete to see, like, oh, I'm bumping into my friend Sally over here and her hula hoop. I must be too close. And they can back up a little bit. It's like one of my favorite games because, again, it gives that visual piece. It lets them know I am too close, I'm not. In terms of doing adaptions in the classroom or even at home, so they're prepped for the classroom, I love doing like little dots or tape. I love painter's tape. It is great for everything. So painter's tape, a square or a triangle, whatever they like, on the floor when you're doing like story time or things like that. This is your space. We do not leave it. That way, again, they have that very concrete visual of, oh, this is my space. I can't go into, to Sally's, square over there. If we're having a hard time sitting at the table with that as well, I've had people do it at their home where you tape a placemat or just tape a square on the table so that they understand, like, hey, all of my food, my drinks, everything, my body has to stay in this square so that I'm not rubbing up against mom or I'm not up against brother. And again, just a very nice concrete visual on where our space is. Depending on the age, 3 is a little bit young, but if you're talking more 4, 5, 6-year-olds, having the conversation of, I always like the uncomfortable or comfortable conversation, especially for our kids on the spectrum, because it elicits a lot of just like good discussion and helping them understand some of those abstract things. But standing like right next to them, shoulder to shoulder, like face super close, be like, does this make you uncomfortable? Am I too close? And giving those examples of being like, well, how does this make you feel? Is your body feeling like really fast and kind of nervous, or is your body calm and thinking that this is okay? And then practicing it with safe individuals that know that this is an exercise, so that they can say, like, hey, you make me feel uncomfortable. You make my heart beat fast when you're this close to me. So that they start to understand this isn't just us being mean, giving you these like concrete rules. How we, act or where we are in space affects others. So if they're older, they can kind of work through some of those emotional and abstract things, that's a really nice activity to do with them as well.
Awesome. A couple more questions. Um, Leanne said, related to that question that you just answered, I've heard that sometimes gross motor delays can affect fine motor delays. Can you give some signs to look for that our gross motor needs to?
Love that question. Yes, gross motor delays absolutely affect fine motor skills. The beautiful saying that every single therapist I'm pretty sure in the world knows is you can't have distal dexterity, so you can't have great fine motor skills if you don't have proximal stability. If you don't have really good core muscles, really solid, base of support. So when we have kids that, typically we have kids sitting up around 6 months old. If they're not sitting up independently until 1 or 2, then obviously that's going to impact their ability to be able to carry out these really complex fine motor skills that we would expect at that age, because their body has been working way too hard to just sit up straight. So I do tell people, just because there's a gross motor delay does not mean we can't work on fine motor skills. It just means that our focus is not going to be core at that moment. If you want me to work on handwriting with an individual who maybe only sits for 30 seconds on their own, then I'm going to put them in a really supportive chair, so that their brain doesn't even have to worry about the core right now. They don't have to worry about the gross motor skill to sit on their own while they write. So yeah, that's kind of like my little spiel on that. But things to look for if our friends are having a hard time sitting up straight, and we see lots of this or lots of just like laying back, really start to look at, is it a core deficit? Is it a core, muscle deficit? Or is it a body awareness issue, which it might be a little bit of both. But also look, are we taking steps reciprocally at this age? We always say feet take turns. Are we going one every other? We're not doing like a step 2 pattern, because at this age we should be doing reciprocal steps, which also contributes to bilateral coordination and knowing right versus left sides of our body. So I look at that. Are we able to jump? Are we able to run? Are we able to catch a ball, kick a ball? Things like that, those gross motor play skills, because if we're struggling there, then we have some big gross motor delays. And if we have gross motor delays, we most likely have some fine motor delays as well, because it's a lot easier for our brain to coordinate big muscle groups typically than it is to coordinate smaller muscle groups. Just a disclaimer with that as well, if you're looking at the difference between boys and girls, our boys are typically going to be more advanced on the gross motor side, a little bit less advanced on the fine motor side. Girls are the opposite, less advanced on the gross motor side, more advanced on the fine motor side. It's just evolutionary based. Boys, the male specimen was typically doing a lot of the gross motor stuff before all of this fun stuff in the evolution of things. And women were doing more of the fine motor things, if you think like picking berries and weaving baskets. So I do always like to say that, like, just because they're a little bit behind, like brother did it at 5, but she's 5.5 and she's not doing, she's not kicking a ball as accurately yet. Okay, well, we give a little bit of grace there. She's still doing it. And we try to keep in mind, the difference in gender. But if you do see some of those bigger gross motor signs, I definitely would look at the fine motor thing too. Also asking families, when did the kids sit independently? When did they walk? Things like that. Because again, if it was delayed, then we might delay our fine motor skills a little bit too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have another question. Recommendations for children with cerebral palsy with hand and body movements. Seems scared to catch himself, and it sounds like they've attempted many strategies.
Oh, I have a lot of follow-up questions for that. I guess, yeah, if you've attempted a lot of strategies, protective reactions are something that can be really difficult, especially for kids with CP, whether we have low or high tone. If we don't have coordinated movements, it's really hard to then position our hands in the correct place to catch ourselves. I'm trying to think of the best way without going on a 20-minute tangent with 7,000 questions on how to answer this. I guess if you'd like more information, Miss Kayla, I'm happy to just chat with you or give you some resources or give you good questions to ask your therapist if you're working with a specific child. But my thought is their brain probably has no concept that it's falling. It just doesn't register that maybe quite yet. A lot of the friends that I've worked with on the more gross motor side of things The sensory motor feedback loop that's in our brain that tells our brain, hey, I'm falling, catch me. I'm gonna assume with the CP, maybe there's like a division there and it's not making that full connection of, hey, I'm falling, catch me. Oh yeah, here motor, here muscles, put your arms out to catch, yourself. Oh, okay, I'm getting the feedback that my hands are down. I caught myself. There's obviously a disruption there somewhere. It could also be some vestibular and proprioceptive insecurities and difficulties where it notices, oh, I'm starting to fall, but I don't really know what that means, and I'm scared, and I don't know how to coordinate my body to get to a position to save myself. There's a lot of things that could be. So yeah, Kayla, use my email. If you have further details, I'm happy to kind of chat through some things with you, or at least give you the right questions to ask your therapist to make sure that you and family are all on the right track and getting where you need to be with this friend.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kayla said thank you, and she will. So perfect. I'm glad that
Beautiful.
you guys can connect. Dawn says, if a child is approaching school age and not holding utensils between the thumb and fingers, should this be a concern?
I would say yes. Typically by age 5 or 6, we want to see them no longer using that digital pronate or that fisted grasp. Um, if we've reached that school age, there's probably some other things going on, whether it's strength, coordination, muscle endurance, whatever it is. It probably does at least warrant some concern. Typically, if that's the only thing going on, it's a really easy fix in terms of we give families, here's some hand strengthening activities. Here's a way to prompt them to hold their crayon or marker. Big fan of broken crayons. Everyone who knows me knows that my box, I don't believe in full crayons. We don't do that. That's not a thing. You play with broken crayons because it's good for you. Because it forces them to use, you literally can't put a broken crayon in a fist and draw. So it forces them to use 3-4 fingers right on that little crayon. So your therapist could definitely give you some recommendations in terms of like little play things to try, but definitely all those hand strengthening things we talked about earlier, broken crayons, verbally prompting them, hey, let's use our pinchers on our crayon instead of our whole hand, to kind of help them along. And also I would say like prompting them to use that same grip on spoons and forks, because typically if we're using whole hand on a drawing utensil, we're probably still using whole hand to kind of like that shoveling motion to eat. So again, using that tripod grasp or quadrupod, grasp to kind of like dip our spoon and feed ourselves. So just giving them multiple opportunities to use the correct one to build that motor plan, strength, and endurance that they need in the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Very good information. I am putting in the chat now the date for the next Lunch and Learn. The next Lunch and Learn is going to be July 23rd at 11:30 to 12:30, same time frame. More info to come in TriStarts, and I'm putting that in the chat. Give me just a moment. We are going to have someone again from Heightened Potential, not Stephanie. Stephanie, you've been so wonderful, and this has been great information. We're going to have Laura with us from Heightened Potential, and she is going to share information with us on co-regulation and early intervention. And this is also going to be a two-parter. So she's going to do co-regulation and early intervention part 1 for us July 23rd. Like I said, more information and the link to join will come out in TriStart, so be looking for that. And that will continue our summer series. So that will be the next summer series, Lunch and Learn. And then in August, we will have her part 2, Laura's part 2. So that will be co-regulation and early intervention part 2. And then we're also going to have our typical quarterly Lunch and Learn, and we are going to have Tea and Step do the second Lunch and Learn in August. So we have our typical quarterly and then part 2 for our summer series. So lots of Lunch and Learn opportunities coming up. Again, Stephanie's email address is in the chat. If you have any specific questions for her, want to request the slides, again, keep in mind on the TEIS community resource website, we do not put the slides there. You can always reach out to the presenter to obtain those slides. However, the recorded presentation from today, that is available on the TEIS community resource website. So thank you all for attending today. We've only got about 3 minutes left, and I don't see any other questions in the chat. The FormStack link to provide some feedback and receive your confirmation of attendance has been placed in the chat. So you can complete that link and that will shoot back your confirmation of attendance. I will hang out a couple of minutes longer just in case anyone has any Lunch and Learn related questions. Feel free to put those in the chat. And then Stephanie, we appreciate your time. This has been such useful information having the part 1 and the part 2 and covering all of the ages that TEIS now serves, because we are looking at some new skills, because we're looking at some new age groups as well. So we appreciate your time. You're free to exit out whenever you like, and we thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. Have a good one.
You too.